it doesn't put up the kind of challenge that a professional would.
And they're not going to use these tools well. And there's other people who are going to use them extremely well and be very successful with them, because I think the nature of these tools is they're exponential enablers if used properly, and exponential disablers if used improperly.
Sort of, it's going to sound clean, it's going to sound put together, and there's going to be nothing under the hood, like no humanness.
All right, let's do this. Hey, MBA Hopefuls, we are on the air with MBA Waves, talking all things business and education. Today on episode 162, we're going to tackle the very buzzworthy elephant in the admissions offices worldwide, artificial intelligence. And today we're going to talk about how AI-generated essays put you at risk for plagiarism rejections, how cognitive debt created by AI dependence might make us all stupider, and what are some intelligent ways to use AI in the MBA admissions process. I'm your host for today, Eric Lucrezia, joined by my co-host, Bara Sapir. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Good to see everyone.
Yes, and today we have two special guests, our dear friends and fellow admissions consultants and AIGAC members, Petia, Whitmore, and Adam Markus. A big welcome to you both.
So excited to be here.
Happy to be here.
Hi, guys. Nice to see you. So let's just jump right into it. Adam, Petia, both of you have published a couple of articles and blogs recently. Petia, yours was featured in Poets and Quants. Congratulations. Let's talk about it. What inspired you to write that article?
Well, I found that there were things that needed to be said, quite frankly. I'm sure that you've seen the evolution of how MBA candidates think about AI and where the conversation is. 2 years ago, when AI, as we're all used to saying, burst into the scene, people were very quick to say, all right, this is the end of MBA admissions consultants, no more need for them. That didn't quite play out that way. But even nowadays, if you go in any of the online forums and you mention anything about looking for support with your MBA applications, inevitably, usually strangers, people who have zero stakes in your outcomes will say, oh, just use ChatGPT. You can absolutely ChatGPT your way into your application. So people, MBA candidates feel almost like there's a pressure that they need to be able to do it that way. But then on the other side of the equation, you may recall we're all at our annual conference in a setting with the schools where you'll recall how they talked about essays having become a little too samesies. And I saw it very clearly in round one this year, probably more clearly than in any of the previous rounds. When I see drafts of essays nowadays, they're always much more technically correct, sort of like they're more polished, if you wish. But the humanness in them is not always there. Very often, there's an overload of just kind of hollow symmetrical phrasing, oversimplicity, clear patterns, like expressions that just exist in way too many essays. So it's become clear that not everyone is using AI in a way that actually helps them in their MBA application. So I'm a huge proponent of AI, and I felt that a conversation needs to start about how to use it well and what is it good at and what is it not good at. So that was the reason I wrote about that.
Absolutely. A good idea. I mean, like, did you get any kind of response from that article?
Oh, I mean, it started a lot of conversations. As you probably know, in addition to working with candidates one-on-one, I also run a group coaching program. So we've actually had conversations there about that particular topic. And then, of course, I've been part of some of the conversations in some of the online forums about it. And some people agree and some people disagree. I think it has, whether or not you should use it at all, there are people who are for and people who are against. There will be people who believe that you shouldn't use it at all. There are people who believe that if you use it at all, you're going to get denied. I'm not in that camp, by the way. I'm absolutely in the camp that you can use it really well, but just because you can doesn't mean everyone will. So people are still very much divided. I also find out that what people cl- call use of AI or use of ChatGPT varies tremendously. Very often, the people, especially those who are sort of opposed to ChatGPT being used in essays, consider using it to mean generate your essays from thin air. So people don't even agree on what's the definition of using it, let alone what's the definition of using it well.
True.
But I'd love to know what made Adam write about that topic too, and what where you stand
Um,
on the
Actually,
AI.
very similar reaction. So, like when I read your article, it aligned perfectly with what I was seeing, which were these very perfect essays. In some cases, um, it was as though every personal aspect was removed, like it was a completely rational essay. No names, no dates, no companies, no no personality, nothing left,
Mhm.
and no human, right? So very well structured in the way that anybody who's played with ChatGPT or any of the other AI models knows they can generate rational texts, right? You give it but it's not generating quality. And so, and I definitely am in the same, camp with you. Like, I think AI is very powerful. I think it's very useful to use. The question of how you use it, and I think anybody who's like a
Question how you
Luddite,
use it and how you judge the output. And I know we're gonna
right,
get to that, but
right.
that's a huge
But
part
that's
of the
and
challenge.
that's where I went with it, which was judgment, which is basically, look, there have always been shitty essays, and I put it that bluntly, because the reality is, some people are bad writers, and some people are
Mhm.
not good, judges of content to begin
Yeah,
with, right? And so if they are lacking the capability of understanding whether the story they're telling is good, that's a
hmm
problem. If they don't know whether they're making a good argument, that's a
hmm
problem. And so if you have people who rely, and this is what the issue I think is, which is a bigger social issue, is you have people who are over relying on AI and not thinking, and they're not necessarily being forced to think either.
Right. What ends up happening is, and you've probably seen it as well, what also ends up happening when people don't quite know what is good in terms of the output and the finished form, they might even start with something that's a strong draft, but then in their attempt to like polish it or make it sound professional or make it be what the schools are looking for, they
Right.
run it through AI so many times that that initial insight, the nuggets, the humanness of it gets pushed out.
Right. And I see that. And it's also like my own philosophy of working with a client, right? Is I tell them I don't care what their first draft looks like. I don't
Mhm.
care if it's short. I don't care if it's a 500-word essay and their first draft is 1,500 words. I don't care, because what I'm looking for is the gold that's in their narrative, and help them figure that
Yep.
out. And if they cook it down and they don't know how to cook stuff down, by the time it comes to you or me, we're looking and we're going, this isn't good.
Yep.
And then we have to like go back and like, hey, oh, it's because I used ChatGPT to give you a 500-word essay. But
Right. To condense it, to
right,
polish it, to make it sound more this or more that. Yeah, definitely. I mean, by the way, I have the exact same approach. I tell my candidates that that their task for the first draft is, I literally put it this way. I'm like, your job is to produce a crappy first draft because it lowers the
yeah,
pressure. Like no one is
Totally.
expected
right,
to produce a flawless, amazing first draft.
right.
Like the idea is to start, to begin capturing your substance.
Exactly.
I'm
And
I
trying.
think
then,
the secret to writing is starting. And
Yeah,
it's
and
sometimes
I am
so
a
hard.
big believer that writing improves your thinking,
of
which is
course.
actually part of the argument for the cognitive debt. But yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
thinking of a parallel right now,
yeah.
like as we've been talking. I'm thinking, the first thing that came to mind for me as it went through my own brain, my own AI, or my own eye, is if you ever have edited music, there's often multiple lines in that music, right? So I was thinking about how when you go through AI and you push it through, you don't have anything really linear. You just have these like patches of essays that come out in splurts. And I was thinking about, well, what is a parallel? Like if we have a recipe, if you have Wonder Bread or you have a really good bread recipe, the Wonder Bread is almost the imitation of what that really good nutritious bread that's
Hmm.
been passed down with the different starter and then the individual input that the person has made that sourdough. And it's the Wonder Bread is still bread, like, but it's almost a facsimile of what bread
Right.
is supposed to be. And so in many ways, the way that you're talking about it is that it just all of this gets squeezed out, all of that humanity gets
The
squeezed out, and you're
nuance, the
left the
idiosyncrasies,
nuance,
if you
the
Yeah.
wish. Yeah.
yeah, all the smudges, all the stuff of life, the scars, the pieces that
The
I don't,
authenticity, perhaps.
the authenticity, and Adam would know the word in Japanese, like the thing that makes it beautiful is the thing that is actually the blemish, or it's the thing that's broken.
Imperfections.
Yeah,
Yeah.
What is
Well,
that art called, Adam?
wabi sabi.
yeah.
That's it. Wabi sabi.
So
Yeah, give me the
in
heirloom
going
tomatoes. I don't want the.
exactly. So I I mean I really enjoy the dance with AI in the different projects that I do, and I go to different sites in order to get a different result. But I'm
Mhm.
curious if we could give our listeners, what are some of the dance steps and what are some of the ways that we can help people to actually use this tool so that they do come out learning and so they do come out giving their authentic voice a really clear channel so that when others read it, that it's actually better.
I'm happy
Let's
to.
if we start with brainstorming, how about if we start like if we break the process down?
Yeah.
So so if we started with brainstorming, one thing I would have someone do is if they're thinking about a particular goal, actually use AI to understand like, okay, what what does that field look like? Use it because it's much better than a search engine. So you can actually use it as a research platform. And if you're, depending on which ones you use, you might want to use ChatGPT and then use Grok, et cetera, to do it that way. And to also just play with an idea. Because one of the things you can do is you can take an idea and you can have a dialogue with a machine that will give you feedback. It can actually be used to help you think through something.
Absolutely. When it comes to career goals, you can totally just use it in a very rich and very productive way. You can say, here's my background, here are my goals, what are my most important, you can feed your resume, what are my most important experiences that will help me and can translate in a meaningful way into that new role, and what are my biggest sort of shortcomings, how do I think about them, which ones can an MBA fill in, and you can obviously direct that conversation in a direction where it uses employment reports from the schools or the career services offices, um, content in terms of what are transferable skills, what are things that someone needs for a certain career. So it can be incredibly helpful and save you a lot of time. And then you can much more effectively complement that starting point with conversations with students. And then you can even incorporate some of that back into it. So for brainstorming and research, I think it's a fantastic source because it's so much better than just search engines 100%.
And the shortcomings, I think, is also super important, and exposure, right? The ways
Yeah.
in which who we are, how are we exposing ourselves? If you're putting something in there that's vulnerable, to understand, is that exposing yourself or is that actually showing your humanity? Right. So
So
where are those places?
yeah, so that's the other, probably like the other part, which you could argue that it goes along with brainstorming, but the self-reflection, it can definitely help guide your self-reflection in that, let's just take the proverbial and one of the most challenging MBA essays out there, the famous Stanford "What Matters Most to You and Why." Um, the way I might approach this if I were to use AI in my self-reflection is I would perhaps start with saying, what makes something be worthy of the label? This is the thing that matters most to me. Like, what should I be thinking about?
Hmm.
And then ask me back questions that will help me in myself uncover areas that might be potential candidates for beginning to form the answer to that big question. And I'm going to speculate and say you're probably going to get something like, for something to matter most to you, it needs to have been lived. It can't be something that's easy. It can't be something that's just theoretical, because if it matters most to you, you should have taken steps towards it in some way, shape, or form. If it matters most to you, it's something that you're going to continue to pursue without an MBA. So again, AI can be your thought partner in asking you the types of questions and pushing you to probe, to explore, to consider various angles. So that's how it can help in your self-reflection, in my view.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, there's a long tradition of books, like if you know What Color Is Your Parachute, which I
Mhm.
think we all know about that one in terms of
I got
career
to
and
meet the author years ago at Babson
yeah,
College's San
yeah,
Francisco campus.
yeah. And I mean, the thing is, the fact that you can now have a device, or that will interact with you to take you through the process of actually thinking through something, you know, in that way, in the way that like a self-help book is always,
Mhm.
it's there, it doesn't reflect back, it asks you the questions, but now there's interaction, and so I think that level of brainstorming can be particularly useful. And it's also been long documented because there one of the very first AI models was a Rogerian therapist model. Like there's actually like just talk therapy using a Rogerian is based on restating what someone says as far
Mm,
as a methodology, Carl Rogers. And so there's been a long tradition in AI of creating bots that would simulate conversation, but they were dumb. Now you have an intelligent agent which can respond in a much richer way. So
yeah.
it can make for a very interesting conversation partner if you have someone who is willing to use it like that. The problem I see
Yes.
is is the people who are willing to do that, because I've had clients who've used AI extremely well. They're very smart, they're
Mm.
serious. They know what a quality text is ultimately going to look like.
Because
They're
what I see
discerning.
also happen on the flip side of what we're talking about, someone might think that using AI to guide your self-reflection, again, to go along with the theme of the What Matters Most to You and Why essay, someone might think that a smart way to use it would be to say, oh, what are the common themes that make for a successful What Matters Most to You and Why essay? And
Yes.
that's how you go down the rabbit hole, and you
Yes.
end up with something that you think there's a type of answer that's the right
Yes.
answer, and you
Yeah.
skip the exploration, the genuine self-reflection.
Mm.
Yeah. In terms of like, I work with a lot of people in the Indian pool, and you know, there's a very high percentage of people who, when they put together their goals or their what matters most statements, they're um, thinking that if it's Stanford, it's got to be, social entrepreneurship, uh, definitely, trying to do impact rather than what their actual abilities, experience would
Mhm.
be. And so if they, go, what are the popular things for what matters most? And they decide that, saving the poor or whatever sort of theme, ridiculous kind of theme like that, that they get caught on that. Now, people have been doing that for years, but so AI can certainly, take someone down the path of
Amplifies that and makes it
stupidity.
um,
Yeah.
because it's going to give you what you ask for. That's the
Yes.
problem. So what you
Yes.
ask for is going to be either your breakthrough moment or it's going to be your peril.
Yes.
And it's positive. It always slants the positive. You're
Oh
always
my goodness,
smart. You're
the
always amazing. You're always
sycophantic.
resourceful.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really it doesn't put up the kind of challenge that a professional would, right?
I
And
actually
Right.
I have a system prompt in my chat GPT, which is I've instructed it to not flatter me too much.
mhm.
It's still
A
hard
little
to
bit is
predicate
fine.
it. What's that?
A little bit is fine, but not too
A
much.
little bit is fine,
Yeah.
but this is actually so interesting that you mentioned this, Bara. I want to mention something. So one of my someone I worked with ended up very smart person, did all the work on their own, and obviously was very well aware of the sycophantic qualities of ChatGPT. So that person ended up running their essays through Gemini. I think it was Gemini, not Claude. And the prompt was sort of give me the harshest criticism you possibly
Mm.
can. And of course, like that was an overcorrection because it like literally ripped that thing apart. And but it also shows you how that's a limitation of what AI might think as a wholesale critic, what AI
Right.
might think is a strong essay, which brings me, I wanted to mention something and I want us to spend some time on this, if that's okay, Eric and Bara. So you've all seen those AI admissions coaches, right? I mean, it's usually like someone who successfully got into a very selective program and in a very well-intended way says, "Here, I created you what I wish I had." So the allure of this is undeniable because like who doesn't think that someone who got into Stanford or into Harvard doesn't know the path, the shining path forward, right?
Right.
But what I've seen happen very often is I've tested every time I see a new model pop up in the online forum, I'll test it myself, right? And I've seen so often the response, the criticism of an essay be in the direction of pushing people to talk about their career goals and what matters most to you, which is generally not the place where you talk about your career goals. You might dovetail them with why Stanford for you, but also pushing people away from describing personal experiences when they involve, let's say, a family member saying, oh, well, this essay is about you. Like, don't talk about some formative experience simply because it's not about you. So it's an example of completely off the mark feedback. But if the candidate doesn't have an internal compass or someone knowledgeable to guide them and say, this can actually be a truly valuable part of your essay because it's something, it's an experience, it's a person in your life, whether a family member or some important mentor who helped identify your values. If they simply take the feedback from AI at face value and say, oh, well, it should be truly all about me, it can so easily go wrong.
Yeah, I, I
Mhm.
mean, I mean the path there for going wrong is so easy, especially because if a what matters most answer is totally self-focused and has no
Mhm.
other direction to it, it's problematic.
Yep.
But I mean, this whole issue of, let's say, the AI set up by someone who got into Stanford, Harvard, or wherever. This is a long-standing problem of alumni knows best, or
Mhm.
which is, like I'm in Japan, and we have definitely a system where people will It's kind of broken down with younger people, but still they often will take the advice of somebody who's senior. But the problem is, of course, okay, so, you know, this guy
They're
got
not the
into
same person.
Harvard. Yeah, no, they're not the same person. Not only that, Mr. Tanaka, who went to Harvard, he was also helped by Adam, and he didn't know what he was doing at all. Because
That's
I have
exactly it.
I have 24 years of clients in the same country, so and from the same companies in many
Have you ever
cases.
helped a
So
child of a former client?
not yet, but that's definitely
It's
very
happening.
close. Yeah,
Here's how I'm going to put it, Adam, and I'm curious if you agree or not. Everyone who gets admitted thinks that they got admitted because of their essays. The reality is, A, some people get admitted despite their essays. I mean,
absolutely.
their essays might
Mhm.
not be all that great and they might still get admitted, but everyone thinks that they nailed it. If they got in, they must have nailed it. And that's the type of essay that gets in.
No.
I often tell the story of one of my candidates a few years ago coming to one of our working sessions, like nearly crying with anxiety because someone at Harvard told her, well, you absolutely must find a club at Harvard that you're going to transform through your efforts, and you need to write about that in your essay because that's what's going to get you in. And my candidate is like, there's no club at Harvard that I want to transform with my efforts. Like, that's not what I want to do. And the funny thing also was that, as you know, essays also change. So that person that was giving that advice, like find a club, transform it with your efforts, was responding to a prompt from a few years ago, a completely different prompt. I'm like, no, no,
Right.
no, no. Let's take a step back. Let's see what gets asked in the question and what's your genuine answer. And there's never a type of
Right.
answer.
Yeah, I mean, advice ages out, and part of I think what Petia or Eric or myself we bring to the process is we have to stay current with what's going on
Mhm.
because yeah, I've gone through now cycles of what was the hot goal, and it's not hot anymore, and we have to be aware of change. And so you get advice from somebody who's not aware of that, they're going to give poor advice for sure.
And
This
there are,
this
What
comes
I
up
always say,
also. This also comes up in test prep, but it's very different. Just so you know, we have the same thing. I love how you put it, where someone gets into a school and so they know how to take a test, right? They know how to study for a test. So it comes up, but it's very different. And I feel like it's the end results are different, and you don't have to have an authentic voice when you take a standardized test, but you do need to know what your strengths and weaknesses are. So when someone comes in and they did great, it's like, well, fantastic. That doesn't mean you know how to do it. Or a parent helps a kid with their essay to get into school, and then all of a sudden they're putting out their placard that they're admissions consultants because they got their kid into that school.
Right.
So
I mean, I always tell people it's not like for the majority of people who get admitted, the admissions committee didn't debrief the candidate and tell them this is what you did great, this is what you did not so great. So they assumed that everything they did was the right thing and it was great. And that's the way.
just like those who are rejected, you don't really have that kind of feedback. I mean, there are a litany of reasons why it's not smart to blindly follow the advice of an alum. They are a different person at a different time with different staff, different prompts, different competition. There are so many factors. It is impossible to, I think, having a conversation with them, learning about their experience, why they chose that school, getting some ideas, but don't like, it's not a copy paste situation at all.
Right.
And
Right.
coming back to one of your points about the over positive, there's some dangerous stories I heard about people having some serious issues with that, like even like really dark stuff. Um, but in terms of accuracy, there was a study I was reading about just yesterday. It came out of Georgia Tech, and they were saying that large language models, they were demonstrating how they hallucinate because their standard training and the evaluation procedures reward guessing over uncertainty. So like if some AI guesses, maybe it'll be right, but if they abstain, they lose relevance. So since like LLMs, their average results across dozens of sources, they aim to pinpoint the truth. But the more complex the subject matter, like, I don't know, like why you and your goals would make sense at X MBA program, the more likely it is to be wrong. So I don't know, even using AI for research, like people must get used to systematically fact checking. And as always, like your best source of truth is going to be the university website itself, right? Like,
You need to use your judgment is
Yeah.
essentially something that is going to become even more important because AI's judgment, might not be 100% accurate. It might not be on point. It simply might not be there, or it might not be applicable to you.
right.
So if anything, it has made the value of having clarity about who you are, what you want to present in your MBA application, and how to do it. That clarity is going to be incredibly important, and it's one of the hardest things to do on your own sometimes, and to tease out of yourself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a point I made at the end of my article was basically, look, unfortunately, there's people who are not going to think, they're not going to have good judgment, and they're not going to use these tools well. And there's other people who are going to use them extremely well and be very successful with them, because I think the nature of these tools is they're exponential enablers if used properly, and exponential disablers if used improperly. And Eric, I've heard about, obviously, like, maybe you were talking about like people who've committed suicide after
Right.
getting advice from an AI. There's definitely been some of that. This is why this stuff is very, it's certainly lacking in certainty. There's a certain amount of risk with using this tool.
You were talking about talking therapy, and I was actually thinking the same thing when you said it. AI is starting to be used as a therapist. And again, what AI lacks is the human judgment. It seems to be the running theme, right? Judgment.
Right.
Putting your life, your mental health, let's say, at least in the hands of a machine that doesn't actually care about you is very scary to think about.
But it can be super
But I
effective.
do.
I will say
It
I'm one of the people who
Okay.
uses, I have a thread in my GPT that's trained to act as a Jungian therapist and help with dream interpretation. And it's incredibly useful and valuable. But
Oh, that's fun.
again,
Dream
like
interpretation.
the
I
judgment of,
But
hey, what you ask for and how you use the output is still critical.
I think that's just it, because like this stuff I've seen is that, like, even like journaling, like, can be psychologically beneficial. Okay, there's been studies of
Mhm.
that. And so, again, if you have a well-trained a prompt, or an agent that's acting like a Jungian therapist, like if you have a Jungian therapist agent, then that could be quite good, as long as you understand what it's doing, right?
Right, right, right.
And just to
Yeah.
look at like a major train wreck of how AI, has appeared in just life. Who was it when RFK's division put forth this whole report that they did, and it was all AI, and they had wrong studies, and they had like people being quoted as putting forth this research that never happened, right? So if something like that happens in your essay and you're very confident about your essay because it sounds good, but you get an admissions person reading it saying like this actually is completely like you're completely thwarting your efforts, and it's happening at the highest level in the United States, and it's
well, yeah. Well, like
so
AI, Junior also lacks judgment.
I mean, AI should never be used as a ghostwriter for anyone. I mean,
Mhm.
you shouldn't outsource your thinking to it. You shouldn't outsource your wholesale writing to it either. I think that the only meaningful way to truly use it is as a thought partner, as a sort of like advanced editing partner. But like the worst thing someone can ever do is to ask it to entirely generate something for them, or to feed an essay into it and ask to
Right.
wholesale or edit this to make it X, whatever X might be.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I mean, that, and it's kind of funny because I, I'm sure you've always seen these essays, which basically are the resume in essay form.
Mhm.
And so, so these guys feed their resume in with a prompt, generate a story based on my, generate an essay based on this prompt. It will generate an essay,
Yeah,
and but
100%,
but it
because
will
that's what
look
you're
like
asking it to do.
and it will give you, it'll take the resume and it'll give you, this very dull, um,
Yeah, I mean, like
unhelpful
no
kind of
human rhythm,
content.
no heartbeat. It's going to be sort of, it's going to sound clean, it's going to sound put together, and there's going to be nothing under the hood, like no humanness.
Right. And I, I mean, we could be cynical about it because certainly for a certain level of educational institution, that will be perfectly fine, you know.
I mean, for better or worse, that's probably true.
But it's
Um,
worse, but it's true.
yeah. Yeah.
We
This is the
jump
thing. You guys were
into
talking about how, AI is kind of taking the average sum of everything that's out there and it's producing this sort of slop, this like inauthentic, average, kind of boring slop. And put yourself in the position of these admissions people that are just receiving all of this same stuff, which is why I kind of made this prediction like a week or so ago is like, I think they're going to over shortlist because there's so many essays they don't know what to do with, and the real decision making is going to happen more in the interview phase. I think there's going to be a higher volume of shortlisted people.
Here's what I'm going to say. I mean, and hopefully you agree. I don't know if you will or not, but in the end, no one gets admitted solely because of their essays. Like people get
Mm.
admitted because of their track record. So in the end, actually, the part that matters most in the admissions process, you could argue, is the resume,
I would
simply because
agree.
that's the container for your professional track record. Again, no one is getting admitted because they wrote the most touching, heartfelt, meaningful, authentic, what matters most to you. Your
No,
track
they're not
record
applying
also
for a
is going to
Pulitzer
matter.
for an MBA.
Um, so the essays, obviously, when it comes to the very selective programs, it's they can give you the ability to stand out, to differentiate yourself among equally qualified candidates. But I don't necessarily know that the essay writing or even substance in and of itself makes someone competitive. It can make them compelling.
If everything else is aligned, it can make them compelling, and it can get them, it can take a candidate, especially if there's, let's say, a lot of questions about their background that the essays can bring out. You can look at the resume and you're like, well, what's going on here really? And the essays can provide an interpretive framework that makes someone
Context,
go,
yeah.
okay, this person is actually great, and we need to interview them. Um,
Right. It can
uh,
help move the needle in so many ways. And again, it can even make someone want to advocate for you. I mean,
yes.
I think back to my days in committee, and I could absolutely remember and recall instances where we're in committee, we're discussing candidates, and we're moving to the next candidate. And the person who's going to present that candidacy, the person who read that file, the person who summarized that file and is going to talk about that to the AdCom, like lights up and like, oh my God, let me tell you about this candidate.
Mhm.
Let me tell you about what they've done. So a really great essay can help bring that enthusiasm in the reader to be like, this is what this person has accomplished, and this is what they are aspiring to do, and this is what they did, and this is how they did it. So a great essay can do that, but it doesn't create a person's substance.
No, and Adam, you said the word alignment, which made me think about the fact that if you're using this tool, say for your essays, and then you meet them on an interview, and there's a mismatch in how you speak, your tone, all that stuff, that's
Of
a red
course.
flag. It just
Oh, oh,
isn't
100%.
yeah.
authentic.
Absolutely. I'm in Japan, where obviously we've had candidates for years who've tried to submit like perfect native level English essays, and they get into the interview situation and they have like a TOEFL score of like 100. Okay. And they're not clearly not. It's there's a total lack of connection between the reality of the candidate and what's in the app.
I mean, I will always forget, and that was pre-AI actually. Someone came to me years ago for a ding analysis. So for anyone who might be listening, ding analysis is when you try to deconstruct and see what went wrong and why the person didn't get admitted. So not only did this person not get admitted to the programs where they were applying, at least one top 10 program told them not to reapply, which is fairly unusual, right? So
Mm,
person reaches out to me, sends me their materials, I read them, they're super polished. Again, that's pre-AI, super polished, very, I'd say theatrical, like almost
mhm,
melodramatic. Say that there was someone was being saved from a burning platform. I'm like, phew, this is like
Wow.
heavy stuff. But then two things happen. One is I can actually see who did the very heavy editing and writing for the person, because the candidate, when they came to me, didn't remove that information from the Word document. So I could see the name of the person, like how heavy-handedly it was edited. Very unfortunately, I'm gonna say it, the person was an HBS alum. And I'm sure that they thought that they were helping by creating this incredibly polished, again, slightly
mm,
melodramatic narrative, which you've all seen that tendency. But then the candidate who I'm doing the ding analysis for gets on a Zoom call with me, and their English is um, the person was from somewhere in Southeast Asia, and their English was kind of more halting than many, like more,
mhm,
so they had to struggle to find words. And I pointed out that difference immediately, and the person even asked me, but how would they know that I didn't write it? I'm like, well, we people who work in admissions, we're not stupid. Like, it's not that difficult. So polish is not where the goalpost is.
right.
When AI first, again, I'll say burst into the scene, because that's what we all say, right? I wrote an article which also got picked up by poets and quants back then, and I made a prediction that AI is not going to be the cure for two things. A, it's not gonna like, if you don't know what to say in your essays, or you don't know how to write, that AI is not going to be the cure for you not knowing what to say or you not knowing how to write. And for better or worse, I still think that's true. I think,
I that's been, of course, I think that's true. That was one of the main points I was making in the piece I wrote. Because if somebody does not have the ability to articulate when they're speaking, and they can't do it, they're not going to be able to do it in their writing. Um, and it's very unfortunate. It's also unfortunate when advisors um, don't let someone speak in their authentic voice.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, I've certainly I work with a lot of reapplicants, and over the years have, for example, helped someone get into Stanford who had been rejected from Harvard and Wharton in round one, and the essays made this person who was from China um, and sound like he had grown up in Connecticut, and it was just ridiculous,
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
and and that kind of thing, unfortunately, uh, is a product, I think, of people in our profession who shouldn't be, um, and in some cases, and also candidates who want to sound like New York Times copy,
And and
which
and
is,
and, and potentially the worst kind of New York Times copy.
yes,
I mean, it's interesting. It's gotten to a point, I'm gonna take a shot here, because I'm famous for doing that, right? It's gotten to a point that I work with a lot of reapplicants as well, that sometimes when they come to me and present their materials to me, there are instances, many instances, where I can even tell who they worked with before, because there's a template, right? Sort of how you structure your
yeah,
story. And that's very unfortunate. Um, it's also unfortunate because candidates think that templates work. And sometimes they'll ask for them and say like, oh, so sort of like, what's the playbook for Wharton or what's the playbook for Harvard? And there's no playbook.
Yeah, the number of times I've had to disappoint people by saying, sorry, you can look at the Harbus, I tell people to look at the Harbus essays because those are out there. They might as well read them.
Good.
But I don't give anybody templates, you know.
Right. But
I
also how you look at it can be very interesting. I'll never forget there was a very young man in my group coaching service. He was applying to a 2+2 program, right? So he's still in his last year of undergrad. And he was asking, will there be templates in ABC? I'm like, no, because I don't believe in templates. And then I said, but you could go, you could find templates even for free. Like even Poets and Quants has a few that they've published, sort of teasers. But
Yeah,
how you read that template is also going to matter, because I remember that young man went and found, I think it was actually an undergraduate Harvard essay, and it was about a woman talking about how she learned to ride a bicycle. And he's like, but Petia, like, how can this be a compelling essay? Like someone talking about learning to ride a bicycle. I'm like, okay, let me look under the hood. So I go and I find the essay, because you can Google it, you can find it. And yes, you could say that the essay is about a woman learning how to ride a bicycle, but the way she talks about it and the way she sort of links it to her thinking and to what she overcame makes it a whole different thing. So you can distill and you can boil down any book. I don't know, like you can distill War and Peace and say, well, it's just some book about war, right? But like, does this really capture the nuance? So what you take away from a sample essay, if you wish, or even an actual true essay, the ability of a person to understand what worked in that particular example or didn't work,
For that
that's
person.
right for
right,
that.
Petia,
right.
Petia,
Which
a couple of weeks ago, you made this post on LinkedIn, on this topic of AI, and you were talking about how AI generated essays could put you at risk for being rejected for plagiarism. Could you explain that to this audience, please?
Honestly, I'm surprised that people are not talking about this more, that everyone is still talking about AI detection. And the reality is that schools are embracing AI. You're going to be asked as a student to use AI. So they're not.
And as a professional post MBA, by the way.
Right. So it's no longer about schools trying to ban the use of it. Of course, they want you to use it in ethical ways. They also want you to learn how to cite your sources, which is a major tenet of how things work in academia. But candidates are still stuck on, oh my God, I used that tool and it's telling me that it's 25% AI generated, but I actually didn't use AI. I'm like, you're worrying about the wrong problem. What worries me is in all of these MBA AI admissions coaches, that what they're trained on is obviously some previous candidate materials, but also you have no idea what the settings of these AI coaches are. And when you feed your own materials, it's going to become part of the training ground, and it's already been fed someone else's materials. And then when it spits out feedback for you, if you take some of that phrasing verbatim, you are at risk for plagiarism, because you may be inadvertently, you may not have wanted to do it, but you don't know what you're copying and pasting or mimicking. And it's also one of the instances where you're not going to have a feedback loop, because the school is not going to tell you that you're being denied for plagiarism necessarily.
mm,
So I feel that it's a real risk.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
Do we want to jump in? I know we only have a little bit of time. Do we want to jump into some of this cognitive debt idea? Because I think that that's really interesting. And I think you both might have something to say about it.
the thing I would say is that this comes down to all of these tools, all AI tools, is that if you're using them to replace your own intelligence,
Mhm.
you are going to have a cognitive deficit. If you are not, if you are using them to the point where they become a crutch that you are depending on, you are basically saying, I'm no longer going to be thinking about this.
Mhm.
And I mean, the work that MIT put out, the research that they put out was showing that there was a clear pattern amongst people who were overusing these tools, that they were not thinking well. And
They couldn't recollect information, or like their depth of understanding wasn't there. I mean,
yes,
just think about this
And
question.
yes,
even
How
their
many people's
recall
phone
of
numbers,
something that
how
they
many people's phone
publish.
numbers do you know today? Like, I
yeah,
remember people's phone numbers from the 80s. I don't even know my own, partner's phone number, unfortunately. I mean, and that's because we're used to having this device in our hands and
right,
pockets.
right.
So expand that to every facet of life with AI. And this
Um,
is kind of like the kind of contradiction. It's like we need to educate not just young children, but like at every level, people need to be educated on how to use these tools. And yet, especially with young ones, if we start them on that and they become like crutch dependent, then they haven't developed the parts of their brain to think without the tool. And then, you lose power or Wi-Fi, and then what do you do? You know?
Right, right.
I will say that I'm doubling down on writing more on my own. I've actually started to move away as much as I can. I used to do something. I talk a lot to I mostly use ChatGPT, although I use Gemini, I use Claude, I use Notebook LM for other things. But I used to talk to my ChatGPT, and I used to dictate my blog posts or LinkedIn posts as I'm walking. I'd be out for a walk in my neighborhood, and I'd be holding my phone and dictating, like, this is what I want to write about, like, help me create a draft. And it's entirely my own original thinking, but I've taken sort of the approach where I'm almost using AI as a note taker rather than an editor. I'm spending almost more time than before editing and ensuring that I present my thoughts exactly the way I want, and I speak the way I speak. I have my own sort of idiosyncratic way of speaking, if you wish. So I'm putting almost like more effort not to over rely on it, because what I find myself doing, to be honest with you, is especially on LinkedIn, I'll see people whose opinion I really respect, but I'll also see how clearly they used AI to create that post, and I'm not reading these posts as much as I used to, because it's just like
Yeah.
there's something that I feel gets taken away. And then the other thing that I'm doubling down on is reading. I'm reading, even like I'm making an even more determined, committed effort to read, where it's fiction, books on scientific topics that interest me, like just great writing, because that's the only way to retain your own sense of what really great writing looks like.
Mhm.
I would absolutely agree. I spend a lot of time reading. And when my eyes are too tired, it's
Audiobooks.
audiobooks. Um, but I absolutely hate AI generated writing, and I don't use it. The only thing I use is spell checking, because I'm not the world's best speller, and as Eric probably knows, I do make typos. So I have to I do check that kind of stuff. And so for me, like, basic word processing functions are great.
Mm.
But I find um it would take away from the pleasure of, for me, for sharing my ideas if I wasn't writing them.
Yeah, I mean, I love writing. I'm fortunate that way. So do you, Adam. So it's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the bigger concern, though, is definitely the overuse of these tools. And I think that it's something to be concerned about. And it goes way beyond admissions consulting, that's for sure.
Of course.
Well, you guys have given a lot of great information. Any final suggestions on how to use AI intelligently for applicants to MBA programs or any academic program, frankly?
Well, I'd start with reading Petia's article on it. It's a good basic checklist of what to do. And if you want to read what not to do, read the piece I wrote on shitty essays. Um, but I think it begins with approaching this in a thoughtful way and not looking for a quick fix. And the problem, you know, the road to hell begins with looking for a quick fix.
Yep. Shortcuts and hacks. If you're using it that way, the chances of you doing it successfully for the very top programs are slim. Here's what I'm going to throw out. People can ask their own, whatever instance of AI they're using, ask it. Say like, am I using you the right way? Am I using you in the smartest, most efficient ways? It's actually pretty good at giving you feedback that way. I've done this sometimes because I use ChatGPT pretty much every day for many, many, many different things, including sort of like to push me and help me be a thought partner on strategies for things that I'm doing, like my group coaching service. And every now and then I'll say, like, where are my blind spots? What am I not doing but should be doing as the business owner of my MBA path and the creator of that particular product? And it gives me some very useful nuggets. Not everything it spits back at me is invaluable, but it still gives me very useful ways. So I guess the parting words in that are: use it as a thought partner and understand that you're going to have to supervise and manage it a lot. Don't use it as a ghostwriter. Like, that's the recipe for terrible output.
Well, thanks again, guys. This has been a lot of good
Yeah.
information. I'm sure our MBA applicant audience will love this, or MBA hopefuls, as we say. Guys, if you're listening, hope you enjoyed the episode and tune in next time. Thanks to Petia and Adam and Bara. Always good to see you.
Good to see
Thank
everyone.
thank you.
Thank you.